In the last video, I talked about the Shattered Empire, more specifically an in-depth look on their governance system, noble titles, and the historical event that caused the empire to become shattered. There isn't a particular storyline to this video, this is rather a gathering of various facts, institutions, jobs, and activities that take place within the Shattered Empire, which should help you understand or paint a picture on how life as a citizen of the Shattered Empire might look like. Let's begin with their ideological system. The Shattered Empire is first and foremost a faction that puts heavy accent on its traditions, rules, and heavy regulations, which are usually required to be strictly followed. We can analyze the Empire's ideology from two sources. The first one is, well, exactly that, the ideology that the in-game pawns from the Shattered Empire have, while the second source will be from Imperial pawn backstories. It is important to separate these two sources as they both contradict and support each other, but that is probably due to the fact that the Empire DLC came before the Ideology DLC, and when the Empire faction was created, there was still no well-established ideological system within the game. But despite the backstories having clear contrast with the ideologies that Shattered Empire faction is generated with, this still makes sense. Let me explain. First of all, let's take a look at what kind of an ideology it's possibly for the Empire to generate with. I started multiple games in Rimworld, solely with the purpose of checking out what ideology the Shattered Empire will have as its default. And while some memes and precepts will change, others will always remain the same. The style is obviously always the same one, Sophian. It is after all a style that originates from their home planet, a bit weird if they won't be making use of that. Their memes, on the other hand, while some can vary, there are two that are always present and immutable, at least from the testing I've performed: Loyalist and Collectivist. Loyalism essentially represents an immutable faith and loyalty towards the established ruler or government and system, much like the Empire holds great faith and loyalty towards their High Stellarchs, towards their emperor, and especially towards the empire as a whole. Collectivism is an ideology that enforces, well, the collective. Collectivists believe that a group of people and what it represents is more important than the individuals within it, much like the empire again, which fully believes that a citizen's life is nothing when compared to the greatness of the empire. Other memes that the Empire faction can be generated with are male or female supremacy and human supremacy, but those are generally random and not guaranteed. Slavery is always accepted within the Empire's ideology, as their collectivism does dictate that a slave's life and freedom is irrelevant when compared to the amount of work and benefit it can bring to the Empire. Drug usage is also disapproved or generally prohibited, so don't expect Imperial parties to be too wild. Child labor is always encouraged, and that makes sense. As we have discussed in the previous video, the honorary title of freeholder within the Empire is something that most citizens acquire at a young age through voluntary work or military service. But the most interesting part is the following. It seems that no matter what, the Shattered Empire's ideology will always hold a strong faith in architects, for they believe architects to be their true gods, which is something I can't blame them for, as architects are indeed the closest thing there is to a living god in Rimworld. So this is interesting. We don't know what architect the Empire worships, but we know that they worship one, as the Imperial backstories with religious backgrounds will always bring mention of one god and not multiple ones. Now, I can already hear it. There is going to be someone mentioning this. Well, what if the Emperor is an architect? It could be, but I strongly doubt that to be the case. We have already established that the Emperor requires the support of lower nobles in order to stay in power, and I heavily doubt that an architect would require that. Plus, that will elevate the Emperor to a status of godhood, meaning that the churches mentioned in various backgrounds will be dedicated to worshipping the Emperor itself, not a god. Another theory could be that Sophia Munda itself was an architect, and that the great calamity that happened and shattered the Empire was the destruction of Sophia Munda's architect. But I also do not believe for that to be the case. It's been already established multiple times that Sophia Munda was a clear world, not a transcendent world. And let's consider this. If Sophia Munda was indeed an architect and it was destroyed, wouldn't that kind of be one of the most important events in human history? It certainly won't be a hidden piece of information up to speculation. Seriously, for an architect to be destroyed, it will be the equivalent of killing a god. News of that will spread across the entire galaxy, stories will be mentioned constantly, and history will take an immutable turn. So I don't believe for that to be the case either. Then why? Why does the Empire's faction worships the architects? What is the hidden meaning behind this? Honestly, I think there is no hidden meaning behind it. I'm going to employ Occam's razor here and say that the reason their ideological system worships an architect is simply because it's what makes the most sense in this universe. It's been proven multiple times that architects are, again, the closest thing there is to a living god. Why won't you be worshipping that? If a planet-sized computer will have the power of thwarting my thoughts, transforming me into a sanguiphage, curing any type of illness, or destroying entire societies with endless mechanoid armies, I would be damn insane not to try to get on its side, if that was even possible. So yes, I do believe that the Shared Empire has an architectural ideological structure simply because it's what makes the most sense for an ultra-technologically advanced society to believe in. And now let's dive into the various imperial backgrounds. Let's see what kind of information we can dig up from there. If their strict societal class system wasn't already a big enough hint, the Shared Empire does not believe in the equality of humans and their rights. From the Empire's point of view, certain humans are no different from cattle, and this is indicated with their inclination towards the acceptance of slavery and even accepting live human prisoners as a form of tribute from outside factions or colonies. Even people acting within a higher status of imperial warriors are considered as fully expendable, as the Empire will often provide soldiers or guards towards colonies hosting important nobles during visits, with the Empire being completely unfazed or unbothered in the event of these soldiers' death, as their lives are most likely seen as inferior or insignificant when compared to the life of the noble that they are meant to protect. Interestingly enough though, the Empire seems to have a strong belief in gender equality most of the times, as it's not uncommon to see both man and woman in high positions of power, either as telarchs or even possibly bearing the title of Emperor or Empress. Continuing on the ideological theme, the Shared Empire puts heavy emphasis on religion and spirituality, with the Church holding great power within the state, acting as a secondary law enforcement authority. A commoner's backstory job includes the occupation of Imperial Inquisitor, belonging to the Church's anti-heresy school. An Imperial Inquisitor's duty would essentially revolve around conducting investigations around supposed acts of heresy and eradicating any form of thought, whether expressed through literature, art, music, or even private conversations that will go against the Church's imposed ideologies and commandments. This indicates that the Shared Empire enforces heavy censorship, and it's likely that most of their media is heavily regulated and checked before becoming public, outright banning and punishing anything that will put the Emperor and the Empire's laws and ideologies in a bad light. Not just that, but mind control is also used on a certain degree to promote the Church's beliefs, as Church psychics will be trained within psychic schools to sense the emotions of a collective of citizens and outright eradicate heretic thoughts, meaning that within the Empire, not even your own mind was considered private, and people will most likely be punished just for having different and unapproved thoughts. The Empire seems to also function on a monotheistic faith, as priests from the Empire's Church, which we already established to exist as an authority figure, will be endowed with the duty of spreading the word of a singular, unnamed architect god. Judging by this backstory, their belief seems to heavily disapprove of two things: alcohol and laziness, essentially promoting an ideology in which the common man should constantly be striving to work for the greater good of the Empire and avoid other kind of distractions. It's unspecified whether alcohol is outrightly banned within the Empire or simply frowned upon, but judging by the power that the Church holds, it wouldn't be unlikely for the first scenario to be the case. If alcohol is outrightly banned within the Empire, yet priests will still preach and disapprove of the act, we can deduce that illegal or underground breweries do exist within its societies, and creating a similar scenario to that of the Great Prohibition era of the United States. While drinking and laziness is clearly considered a sin within the Sophian society, there is a chance that the oldest job in the world might not be only approved but also legal within the Empire's territory, as a possible backstory for a commoner's childhood might include being a bastard offspring, born from the intercourse of a noble with someone from a brothel. It is unclear though whether those brothels will be legal within the Empire or not. Commoners will also be often employed or find themselves in servitude of noble families, with jobs including the likes of royal cooks, tasked with creating gourmet masterpieces for their masters, house servants, tasked with keeping the noble residences spotlessly clean while attempting their best to have the least amount of contact with their masters, only reporting and taking orders from the house's head butler, which was tasked with managing the other servants and doing its lord's bidding. Another type of servant, which will often have contact with the royal nobles, will be the one taking the role of a royal masseuse, which will be tasked with employing various massage techniques to please the nobles, sometimes even having to recur to certain favors in order to remain in their favor and advancing in their line of work. Spectacles, art and entertainment are also common within the Empire's nobles, as possible career options for commoners would include becoming ballet dancers or ornament makers, and in some cases even menagerie keepers, tasked with caring for the household's private zoos. And if not artistically inclined, commoners could also direct their lives towards other paths, such as becoming crop farmers, cattle breeders, planetary miners, factory assemblers, or even working within mail delivery companies, while more ambitious commoners could strive towards a corporate career, starting as simple office workers attempting to promote towards management positions. But let's make a step up in the Sophian ladder, far away from the common rabble and into the lives of nobles. Just what kind of specific duties would nobles have to fulfill within the Empire? One of them was that of a land worker, a noble position which implied heavy involvement within the more industrious side of life, supervising and managing agricultural lands and mineral exploitment companies. And while they will be never required to manually take part in these activities and work the fields or the drills themselves, it was still required for them to have the proper knowledge of various farming and mining methods. Nobles that were more artistically inclined could build a fortune upon investing on various forms of art, becoming patrons for various artists in order to finance the production of artistical expressions that will glorify their family, the imperial church, and the empire itself. But with a society that puts such a heavy accent on the aspects of nobility and politics, it's only natural that the art of subterfuge and information handling will be heavily practiced, in particular by the nobles taking the role of spy masters within their household, requiring a cold, calculating nature in order to partake in activities that involve the usage of the blade, poison, and betrayal. And while this lifestyle might require a subtle approach in the arts of violence and death, direct approaches will be taken by the nobles partaking the role of war masters, overseeing the military matters of their households and sometimes even directing the commanders in the field of battle. And while we're on the subject of military, let's talk about the Imperial Army. What kind of positions could someone fulfill within the military regiment? If we exclude the simple role of line infanteers, essentially the army's cannon fodder, soldiers could take on various specializations, such as engineers, recon snipers, medics, or officers. Demolitionists are self-explanatory. Requiring nerves of steel and a steady hand, demolitionists are tasked with the manufacturing and handling of explosives used to breach enemy defenses. Skilled pilots, meanwhile, could aspire to the position of firebombers, becoming fighter bomber pilots, a type of flying vehicle specialized in the spread of incendiary gel over flammable targets. And if piloting a miniature napalm spreader won't be adrenaline-inducing enough for you, aiming towards the position of ship cracker would always be an option. Probably one of the most dangerous roles within the army, shipcrackers are a special military unit whose role is to be essentially launched through the vacuum of space towards the hull of enemy spaceships in order to penetrate it, gain access in the interior, and steadily conquer it from the inside through the use of advanced cataphracts armor and melee weapons. likely monoswords capable of cutting both through flesh and steel, requiring a heavy expertise in close quarter combat. But if you're unskilled in the usage of a charged weapon or monosword and yet want to avoid becoming cannon fodder, do not worry, the Empire still has use for you in the army's backstage. Ever heard of the expression, "The pen is mightier than the sword"? This expression will prove true in the role of Empire's propagandists, tasked with creating works of art that will favorably depict the army and its lords. But within the military, the most unforgivable act that someone could do was abandoning the army and becoming a deserter. Whether out of cowardice or ideological reasons, deserters and traitors are all treated the same within the Empire, and will be forced in a life of isolation, often taking refuge within Rimworlds in an attempt to escape the Empire, as the army will make a point out of mercilessly hunting down deserters and any that will dare help them in their escape. It is important to note that while the above mentioned lifestyles and professions mostly take place on land, many citizens of the Shattered Empire end up spending their entire lives on board of ancient starships, sometimes never leaving their enclosure, with these spaceships acting essentially as large cities amidst the void of space, where Imperials will take refuge, especially those living alongside Rimworlds, in order to avoid contact with the outside world, with the few Imperial colonies present on Rimworlds acting mainly as outposts to gather resources and tribute from other colonies. And with this, I have finished my analysis. If you have enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and turn the notification bell on for more similar content in the future. Also, leave a comment down below and tell me, if you were born on a Sophian society, what career do you think will fit you the most? Would you prefer the simple, hardworking life of a commoner or the pampered yet intrigue-filled and political life of a noble? With this, I wish you a good night, and I will see you in my next video.